Last time we started looking at bypassing, things that people do to avoid three aspects of recovery that are difficult. So the one is that recovery requires a lot of hard work. The other is recovery requires dealing with painful emotions and trauma. And the third is that recovery is a slow, messy process. And so bypassing or spiritual bypassing is a form of trying to find a way to bypass those three difficult things, to find a magic fix that gives me instant solution without pain that isn't hard work. And it's a common thing that people desire this, but it never leads to the desired results. It always messes up their recovery. So I want to go a little bit further today, and I want to begin by just having you think about fawning and spiritual bypassing, because for many people, spiritual bypassing is a form of fawning. So what we have seen is that in complex trauma, the first responses of the brain to danger are fight and flight. But if a child is too little to fight or flight, then they go to freeze or dissociation. I am going to escape to an internal world where I feel safe. But a child still needs mom and dad to meet their needs, mom and dad to like them enough to meet their needs. So they go to the fourth F, which is fawning. I am going to learn how to please you, to do what you want, to conform to your values, your wishes, your beliefs, your standards, so that you'll like me, so that you'll take care of me, so that you'll protect me. So it becomes the ultimate survival tool for a child in complex trauma. And so what I have found is that many fawners are drawn to spiritual bypassing. So they go into an organization, let's say a church or 12-step group or some other organization, a recovery-based organization, and they're a fawner, and they're good at it from childhood, and so they listen and they watch to see what is valued around here. What are the normal practices around here? What's the language people use around here? What do people get validated for around here? And they slowly begin to learn all of that. And so if they go into an area where there's a lot of spiritual bypassing, where people are praying it away, have faith, using all these different verses to promise a quick fix to things, then they're going to, oh, that's what you got to do. And they get really good at it. They get validated for it. They get accepted as being a very spiritual person. And that meets their need. That gets them the acceptance and love that they've always longed for. And so many people that get drawn into spiritual bypassing often are fawners. So let me again read from Ingrid Clayton. Spiritual bypassing can mask fawning. Someone may appear spiritually evolved, compassionate, forgiving, high vibe, always giving, yet underneath is a trauma survival pattern of self-erasure, catering to others to stay safe or loved. So for example, being a good girl, that was fawning, or always forgiving, spiritual bypassing, may actually be fawning and a bypass combined. So let's begin with, how do you recognize if you're bypassing? So give you 5 things. Number 1, you feel numb, detached, or too calm when you're talking about something very painful. And that's because you were told you should feel calm. You shouldn't be feeling the depth of that painful emotion, that somehow that's bad. Secondly, you jump straight to forgiveness, meaning, or the lessons I should learn, without going through the grief or the anger. So you want to get to the end result without going through the process. Third, you use spiritual reasoning to justify saying yes when actually you want to say no. Fourth, you tell yourself that being triggered means that you're failing spiritually. And 5, you confuse being nice or non-reactive with being healed. 5 very good things to test yourself with. So let's break it into the key characteristics. So number one is using compassion, forgiveness, service, insight, all of which we talked about last time, as the way to prove I'm healed or get healed instead of doing deeper emotional or body work. So someone said this: mountains of analysis or being a good girl were simply bypassing my unresolved wounds. Secondly, minimizing or ignoring one's own pain or needs in favor of appearing spiritual or self-sacrificing. So in bypassing, there's always going to be a minimizing or ignoring of your own needs or your own pain. And you're going to find a way to make that sound right and spiritual and do other things. Third, an overemphasis on being nice, always being loving, no conflict, just let it go, rather than setting boundaries, showing anger emotions, addressing underlying hurts. Fourth, using spiritual or psychological concepts. So for example, everything happens for a reason, or just send love to that person, to avoid dealing with relational harm, trauma, injustice, or anger. And finally, in the fawning and bypassing interplay, keeping the peace, merging with others, staying invisible, shaming the self for having negative emotions. Those become the priorities. So I hope you see that these aren't healthy. They look healthy. They sound spiritual. But man, they are avoiding the key elements of getting healthy. So what are the dangers? So I'm going to say this carefully, but I want you to please hear it. So think of a child who's genuinely really, really scared. So the parents, instead of comforting that child, connecting to that child, giving that child healthy tools to deal with the situation they're facing, the parents, they just say, tap on this surface 3 times. That's their solution. So the child doesn't learn any tools. The child doesn't get to talk about their fear. The child doesn't get to connect. They just tap. Now, that seems to make them feel a little wee bit better. So the child goes, oh, maybe this is good. This is helping me. So the next time they face fear, they tap 3 times. And they calm down a little bit. It does have a bit of a soothing effect. It turns into OCD. And now the child, every time they face anxiety or fear, they're tapping. They hang on to that. That's the only tool they have. That's the only solution they have. But it gives less and less comfort and soothing, and the fear just keeps growing and growing and getting worse and worse. And pretty soon their life is totally dominated by fear, and they no longer can find reprieve from it. Now, what would you say about those parents? Well, they did things to make the child feel good in the moment, but they didn't give them tools that actually worked in the long run. So were the parents being nice, or were the parents actually hurting the child? And that's, to me, the same with spiritual bypassing. Somebody comes in and people go, oh, just do this. It'll make you feel better, yes, in the moment, but it's not giving you the tools in the long run to actually deal with the problem. And in the long run, it's going to lead to disillusionment and actually getting more pain and more hurt. The next thing that I want you to think about is this. Everybody that I have dealt with over the years that uses spiritual bypassing, they will grow a little bit, but their growth always stops. And other people start growing beyond them. Why? Because they're avoiding dealing with the key aspects that would lead to greater growth. And so it's like a person who's at the bottom of a mountain. And instead of doing the hard work and the slow work of getting up that mountain, which would involve a lot of pain, they keep hoping there's going to be a magic solution to get to the top of the mountain. So they're never going to get to the top of the mountain because they're waiting for this magic fix. And so ultimately, it hinders growth. So let me end with this. If you realize that you have been bypassing, what are some of the steps you can take to start to change that to unbypass? So recognize that it's not spiritual maturity. Bypassing is avoidance. It's not spiritual maturity. A mature path involves feeling, processing, integrating. It never involves bypassing. Secondly, reconnect with your emotions, reconnect with your intuition, with your body. Learn to set boundaries. That is what true recovery looks like. That's what healthy maturity looks like. It's connecting to all of my humanity. Third, you got to get good at boundaries. You got to be able to say no, to express anger in a healthy way, to express your needs in a healthy way. As long as you're fawning, as long as you're conforming to fit in, you're never going to grow beyond a certain point. So learn to develop agency, autonomy, where this is me, this is what I need, I am worth standing up for, and I will do it. Fourth, get to know how you responded to trauma, what it looked like, your patterns. So if you see fawning and that you believe that if I'm just nice then everything will be okay and I got taken care of, begin to recognize that and begin to make choices to change that. So that leads to the fifth thing is get help. Participate in practices that are trauma informed, where you have body awareness, somatic therapy, nervous system regulation, dealing with shame, dealing with emotions. So it's not just some academic exercise or spiritual fix. It's dealing with all of you, bio, psychosocial, spiritual. And accept that recovery is hard work. There's a lot of pain involved, and it's slow and messy. Don't look for some shortcut or easy solution. And then recognize some of the lies that you've believed as part of your bypassing. So deconstruct a lot of the things that you've been doing as bypassing techniques and see the lies embedded in them. And then when you're triggered, doesn't mean you failed. It means that your limbic brain is feeling a lot of painful emotions that connect to an unresolved wound from the past. So instead of seeing yourself as a failure, be compassionate and then start to explore, what's this all about? Where's the healing need to happen? That becomes an important part of the journey. So bypassing, I hope you can see it if it's part of your experience. I hope you can see how damaging and restrictive it is and how it doesn't lead to true healing. And I hope you're able to start letting go of that and to enter into this journey seeing things accurately, accepting what's involved, and doing the work necessary. Thank you again. If this was helpful, please like, subscribe, share, comment. We really appreciate it. Until next time, have a great day.